Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doc episode 21. We're so excited to present today a continuation of our sugar series. So this is episode part 2 of sugar. Today we'll talk about hemoglobin A1C and continuous glucose monitoring. We'll mention a couple other topics as well. So if just a little intro here, if you like our videos, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe so you hear about all our future episodes. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Abbas to kick it off.
Hello, everybody. On the last episode, we discussed about the history of the sugar. As you mentioned previously, the sugar was around about 4000 BC, and when it got crystallized about 2500. That's where the export of the sugar from India to Middle East, China has developed. During the initial phase, mostly this was used as medicine until maybe 800-900 years ago, when through the Moorish, as then other math came to Europe, and then as 1600, when the New World was discovered, the sugar was brought to Caribbean as well as Brazil, and that was one of the main unfortunate force of slavery. And since then, the sugar has become a household in most of the houses. And for the past couple hundred years, the sugar was also produced from beets, and for past 85 years from corn, high fructose corn syrup. And the consumption has gradually increased from 1700, about 2 pounds per person in the United States, to 1800, about 9 pounds. And today we consume more than 150 pounds of sugar per year in the United States. Due to high consumption of the sugar, multiple medical problems has arisen, including obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, hypertension, fatty liver, and some people live with dementia, and many other medical problems has arisen from that. So we know there's abundant hidden sugar in most dietary meals that we take, particularly processed food and fast food. So today we're going to be focusing on, now we know about that, how we measure the sugar. There's many methodology that how to measure the sugar, and this way personally be in charge of your own sugar, as well as how to monitor your previous as well as present sugar. So Rob will go through some of this fascinating test, and then we'll continue with conclusion at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Abbas, for that summary. And yeah, the measurement of glucose in the blood is actually a pretty major medical advance. Years ago, it was a major endeavor to measure someone's glucose. You needed an instrument the size of a refrigerator. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was quite a big deal. But now, as you'll see here in a few minutes, you can actually do it at home, either with a glucometer, little prick of the finger, or something called the continuous glucose monitor, which I'm wearing today. And see if you can see it here. It's a little device that you can it's covered right now. It's got a cover on it, but that's a continuous glucose monitor that I wear just to track my blood glucose. And we'll talk about why I do that, and what I've learned about that. Obviously, consult your own physician for advice if you're thinking about a continuous glucose monitor, but these devices are probably going to be over the counter probably within the next year or so. We're expecting these devices to be available, so you'll be able to go into a pharmacy or go into Amazon and just simply buy them. And so that'll make it a lot easier to measure these measure glucose, and also other metabolites like lactate and other things are going to be measurable as well in the not too distant future. So And the big one, of course, is Apple's coming up with transdermal glucose monitoring, which is actually in existence. It actually does work. Where someday we suspect that'll be integrated into Apple Watch, where we'll be able to measure glucose on the watch, so you won't even need to even prick yourself to measure. But so what is this? You'll hear this term hemoglobin A1C, HbA1c. This is we'll say this term probably a couple dozen times in today's talk. And what is it? Why are we talking about it? What's the big deal about this? Why is your doctor talking about it? Why is he or she measuring it at least yearly for your physical? So what this is something called glycated hemoglobin. So it turns out that monosaccharides, or most sugars, like fructose and other sugars, attach to hemoglobin, the red blood cell. That's what carries oxygen in the red blood cells. And actually, sugar, when it's floating around in the bloodstream, attaches to this hemoglobin. It's very common. Glucose actually does not attach so much to the hemoglobin, but some of it does. It's not an enzyme process. It's actually just it's linked, but it's not an enzymatic reaction. It's actually just bound to the hemoglobin, and it's what's called glycated hemoglobin. And it was initially discovered in the 1950s and actually further characterized in the late 1960s when it was linked to diabetes. And as Abbas told me a few minutes ago, an Iranian gentleman discovered it. And that was a very key discovery in medicine, because later on it was discovered that this actually serves as about a 3-month or 90-day moving average of one's glucose levels. So you can actually measure this percentage of hemoglobin A1C in the blood and actually get a pretty good idea. It's not perfect, but a pretty good idea of someone's blood glucose. So as the blood glucose goes up, the A1C goes up. And it's taken us, took about 40-ish years after the initial discovery to that we're now actually defining diabetes as an elevated hemoglobin A1C of 6.5% or higher. 5.7 to 6.5 is pre-diabetes or predisposition to diabetes. And these values are a little bit different for everybody. They're not exact. So it's a gauge. It's kind of like a instrument on your car. It's not an exact, precise, but it's a pretty good idea. There is some ethnic variation in these values. So I was looking this up, and it looks like values do tend to run higher in Asians and in Blacks. So we tend to see levels in the maybe about 0.2% higher in Asians and Blacks. So it's interesting. So again, it's not a perfect, but it's a pretty good gauge of the glucose levels. And also, interestingly, if someone has an abnormal hemoglobin, so if you are an individual who has a hemoglobin variant, your A1C could be way off. And so this is something that is kind of something I see occasionally in my practice in hematology. But we'll see individuals, and I've seen a few patients over the years were referred for an elevated, and read papers about these individuals. They're referred for an elevated A1C, but they're not diabetic. And sometimes they're placed on diabetic medication. Then they become hypoglycemic. They have a low glucose level. They get sick from the hypoglycemia, and their doctor says, "Why aren't what's going on? Why aren't you taking your medicine? I gave you this medicine. Why aren't you taking it?" The patient is taking the medicine, but it turns out they have a variant hemoglobin. So that's a rare situation, but it does.
And also people with sickle cell and other anemia can also falsely obscure hemoglobin A1C, right?
That is true. Yes, the A1C can be a little bit off in those individuals with because sickle cell is another variant hemoglobin S, and that is can also cause a little bit variation in the A1C. as well. So individuals with varying hemoglobins, we tend to measure the glucose values over time. That tends to be a very convenient, a more accurate way to see what if they're actually diabetic or not. We may not use the A1C or just use the A1C as a data point, but not rely on it as much as to make a full diagnosis of diabetes. The one of the best ways to actually diagnose diabetes is the 2-hour glucose challenge, where you actually drink it's like a soda, or it's a fixed amount of glucose. Say, for example, um, I think it's like 200 milligrams of glucose. It's a good dose of glucose. And don't quote me on the amount, but it's a dose of glucose. You drink it, and then measure the glucose after that at certain fixed intervals, typically 2 hours after the glucose is given. And I think it's 50, might be like 50 grams of it might be about 50 grams of glucose right after, and then that's actually one of the standard ways to measure and diagnose diabetes. So in individuals where the A1C is not accurate or is completely erroneous, then the glucose challenge test can be used. I thought we could talk a little bit about continuous glucose monitoring. Abbas, anything before I jump into that? Anything to add?
No, that's in the glucose challenge given routinely to pregnant female for preeclampsia. So another thing, just the daily, just basic glucose sugar. The simple thing that have been done from is by glucometer, and these days they are available in most house. But this new continuous that you talk about, I think that's the future and the best way to know what your sugar is. And so no, go ahead. I think that's I think so far so good.
Okay, so let's talk about the glucometer just to get started and for comparison purposes. So glucometer is you take your fingers, and you prick them with a little device called a lancet, and get a little drop of blood, and then put it on a test strip and plug it into a machine. And that uses light to then measure the glucose value in that sample. And that value, they're pretty accurate. Those values within a certain range, from about 50 to several hundred, you can get a pretty good value. Once you're out of range, then you have to get a blood or a serum glucose value. That's the traditional way to test blood sugar. And that's the issue with it is it's intermittent. And so typically it's done before meals and at other times when someone wants to check. But obviously you can only do it maybe 5-10 times a day. Otherwise your fingers are going to be pretty painful, and you're not going to be too happy about pricking your finger every couple hours. So technology has been developed to look at what's called interstitial glucose. So this is glucose in the fluid surrounding muscle cells. And there's basically a little filament. This is the applicator for a continuous glucose measuring device. You can kind of see it here. It's a little bit, this is the device that you use to insert the filament for continuous glucose monitoring. This is a company called Dexcom. And basically what happens is you put this device on the arm, say, for example, like this, and then push the button, and then it applies a continuous glucose monitor filament into your arm. It can be used you can put it in the tricep area or in the abdomen, and this little filament just sits in the muscle. And then you apply a transmitter to that sensor, and then it just directly goes to your phone, and then you can get continuous data. Every couple of minutes, it'll let you know what the glucose value is. And so this has been something that can be used traditionally for type 1 diabetics. Those are individuals who produce no insulin, and so they will need to monitor their blood glucose very closely and administer insulin to themselves. Can also be used with an insulin pump, so that now the apps can be tied into the insulin pump software, and so you can actually program your insulin pump to, if you're eating, there's a glucose spike, the pump can then administer the insulin immediately. It's kind of simulating a pancreas. It's pretty cool. It's and definitely for type 1 diabetics, they can get very tight control of their blood glucose, which is really I mean, that's a major advance for people with diabetes. And so that's something that is now available for individuals. Also individuals who have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes like myself who have I have an A1C of currently 5.9, and so I'm working to try to get this level down, and to really study the effect of certain meals and foods and how to, and the timing of meals, how to, it's really interesting. And I'll show the app here in a second. We can share it and see what my data is for today. So
Rob, in glucometer, I know if it's more than 400, it is inaccurate. With this one, is there any limitation that when sugar goes high, is there any discrepancy between the sugar and the monitor? Has that been any report on that?
I'm not sure about that. I can tell you that the range on the app goes from about 50 to 400. I
Okay.
believe it's accurate within that
Yeah,
range, but out
probably.
of that range, it's I don't think it's accurate anymore. Also, it's we're not measuring serum glucose with this. It's interstitial glucose, which closely tracks serum glucose, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what's called the Levels app. It's a small startup company called Levels, and they're basically a company that helps individuals monitor their glucose using continuous glucose monitoring, or CGM. So and there's several companies that do this. This is just the one that I use. So, but I'm not a paid consultant or anything. I just use their service, and I pay for it. It's for a certain monthly fee. I think it's basically, to do this for a month, if you were to do it continuously, costs about $200 to do these, to have these devices, which last for 10 days. Each one lasts for about 10 days. So this is the main screen, and basically what it shows is the glucose value when last night. It has a little bedtime area here where when I went to bed, and then it just shows the glucose. When I woke up in the morning, it got up at 6:30 this morning, a little sunrise icon there, had breakfast. And then I did actually eat some oatmeal this morning, and had a little spike, and then actually got a double peak, which was a little bit unexpected. Usually I work out in the morning, but I didn't this morning because we were going paddle boarding, so I worked out a little bit later. But I ended up getting that double spike, and actually got a triple little hump after that. And then basically, as you can see, I didn't log lunch, but I'll log my lunch here in a second. You can see how that works. So if you wanted to log a meal, you just hit the little plus sign, and you can put in the food that I ate. Say, for example, I ate zucchini. For lunch, and also some sardines. So you just put the time in. I ate it. It's roughly 12:30. And ask you to pick the ingredients that I ate in that. And basically it's looking that you can put the ingredients in. And then what it'll do is, once you have this all, it'll calculate what's called a zone score. So it'll be able to, so that this meal here, you can see scored a 6, and there's different levels of the scores, and you can compare different meals. So in this case, so it's a score from basically 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, and then the level is this did have a little bit of a rise in the glucose, but not very big, about 20 milligrams. You can also compare different meals. You can pick different meals, search previous logs, and look at different things. And you can kind of compare for example, the other day I did eat, we went to an Italian restaurant, got some dessert, and so you can so you can see how the zucchini sardine did much better than the dessert that I had ordered, and the lasagna, obviously, which had a huge spike. Um, so you can you can do some comparisons, kind of interesting. But it lets you pick and record individual foods, so you can keep a close eye on that. It also encourages proper exercise, at least 30 minutes a day of exercise, getting at least 7 hours of sleep at night, which is important. And so it'll put here so it saw that I got 7 hours of sleep. And then if I did do exercise today, so you can actually log that as well, as you just log the activity. And I did paddleboard. Here it is. And I did it today at 11 o'clock. And then to about 1:30. See, and you can then basically it'll account for that. If the exercise was strenuous, then sometimes we'll see a transient increase in the glucose with strenuous exercise. It's actually pretty normal. And then basically you can look at your data here and see the different meals, the different responses and then you can look at, so for today, my average glucose was 93. Standard deviation of the glucose values was 15. Ideal is around 12, but 15 is not bad. I did have one glucose spike of 1 hour and 14 minutes. And it shows what I ate. So that's the idea. I think it's a very interesting technology. This has helped me to figure out what foods I should and shouldn't eat, and also have just some idea of what the impact is. Abbas, do you have a question?
No, no, I think this is fascinating. I think that is a great thing to monitor and know what you're eating. Sometimes maybe a good discipline on the action of what you're eating. So that's fascinating. I think, and for most individuals, this is expensive to buy, but hopefully in near future, this, as you said, become over the counter, cheaper, and hopefully with our Apple Watch, pretty soon we can monitor how, as we do exercise and monitor our blood glucose. No, that's great.
Yeah, and this is something that doesn't need to be done on a very frequent basis. For most individuals, what I've heard is that about 3 to 4 weeks of monitoring, you can get a pretty good idea, and that I would agree with that. Pretty good idea of what
you're talking about 3 to 4 weeks a month, or 3 to 4 weeks
total.
ever?
Yeah,
total.
Just being able to get a sense of
what you're eating.
Yeah. I'm kind of I'm a kind of a data nerd. I just like looking at this stuff. So I've just enjoyed doing it just for really just kind of to see. And then you can also you can gamify it a little bit too, where you can introduce, for example, if you eat something and then exercise, you'll notice that doesn't cause as much of a rise in the glucose. That's a little trick that you can do to help just to avert or reduce the peak a little bit. Another little trick that you can learn to do. And there's something called the Hawthorne effect. So that behavior changes when you're being watched. And so that's, I think, a little bit of the Hawthorne effect here is that, if your glucose is going to spike, well, maybe maybe I won't eat that, or I'll pick something different. For example, tomorrow I probably will not eat oatmeal for breakfast, because I know that today it caused a pretty big rise. Just some general observations that sleep definitely usually makes a huge difference, and Abbas is going to talk a little bit about that later. But definitely, if I slept poorly, or very few hours, even 3, 4 hours, glucose is high, about 10 to 20%. That makes a huge difference. The some foods that I thought were healthy, and I think are still healthy for most individuals, like oatmeal and rice, can be huge spikers. So just be aware of that. Oatmeal and rice for some individuals, and potato can be a huge spiker. And so that's something that I definitely learned when using this technology. Also, the timing of meals can be important. Some individuals are more sensitive for insulin sensitive in the morning. Some are more insulin sensitive in the evening. Most individuals are more sensitive in the morning. And so one other thing that I found was that I have tended to eat very quickly, and that's something that I started doing during my med school and residency. Is we just don't have that much time. We're just busy, and so we're just having to eat fast. I mean, within like minutes. Sometimes lunch is 3, 4 minutes, and just you're just seeing patients. You're busy. You're just going, and so that's something that is not friendly. So eating fast is not glucose friendly for me. And so that's something that I did recognize with this. And so eating slowly, chewing one's food, putting the fork down between bites. And that just makes a huge difference. And I've had some meals where I've spent, 30, 40 minutes eating, having this conversation with my wife or friends. And you'll notice that the glucose doesn't go up nearly as much, even with the same food. And so the rate of eating can also make a difference. So yeah, lots of little things like that.
Exactly. I think it was a great conversation about how to measure the sugar, how to monitor it, and as it all comes to lifestyle. So the lifestyle, I think, as I always mention to my patient, number one, of course, is stress. The more you control your stress, as you says, a lot of people have said they go to Europe and they eat a lot of food and they feel like the sugar is a lot more monitored than here. Again, taking time, chewing the food, selecting the food, how fresh it is, and enjoying the meals. That's one thing. Exercise is very, very interesting. That if you just, and I always recommend to most of my patients, at least in the evening or not every day, go for a walk. Even 10 minutes walk after the meals will decrease your sugar by 12%. If you do moderate exercise for half an hour a day, that will reduce your sugar by 30%. So these are all interrelated with how what we do, avoiding the sugary drinks and choosing the right meal. And next time we're going to talk about many different food with their glycemic effects. So then we can choose our food properly. But in general, I think now we know the history of the sugar. Now we know how we measure it, and the effect are tremendously, from hydration with adequate water, sleep adequately, taking time during the meals, exercising, and all of these things will affect our blood glucose, and that will prevent many diseases, as we discussed, from the obesity to hypertension, fatty livers. Another thing I think is, for me, is very, very important, following the circadian rhythm, the as many this diet or fasting, mimic diet or fasting, is the evening meals. I think the evening meals should be, again, the smallest meals, since we sleep, and if we eat so much, particularly within a few hours of meals, we get acid reflux, and consequently we don't get a good night's sleep, then consequently the sugar will be elevated, and then people, they don't have a good breakfast. So I think some behavioral modification and lifestyle modification will help us. And then on the next episode, we'll discuss individual meals with the glycemic effect, and hopefully that will help you to monitor your sugar, and as well as better living.
And I think we should also delve into that circadian rhythm a little bit. It's a modern lifestyle, and those big dinners has become a normal
Enemy of
part.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just every day. Everything is dinner, 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 and those are most our calories. We're giving a huge amount of calories right before bedtime, and there's also alcohol. There's desserts. I mean, there's it just the glucose load can be
Phenomenal. Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Especially if you're eating like Italian food or something that has a huge amount of carbs, and so it's Yeah, definitely. As a boss said, it's lifestyle choices, and it's we have to, of course, live, and we have dinner meetings and whatnot. Those are all things that we sometimes can't control, but we can choose what we eat and the amount that we eat. And so, for example, my wife and I have started taking, eating half and bringing it home and having it for lunch the next day because it is sometimes a huge portion.
And just or going for a short walk after dinner, it just makes so much sleep better. Make sure you're more comfortable, and then consequently, you'll be better eating more breakfast. So we'll delve to this more in detail in next few episodes.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. If you like the episode, please drop us a comment, drop us an email. We'd love to hear your feedback, and hit the like button if you like the episode. And we will catch up with you in a few weeks with sugar part 3, and we'll talk about the glycemic index of several different types of foods and lots more info about sugar. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.